Okay, man, I've been here before. All right. So you're only seeing behavior at school. All right. This particular behavior and whatever the incident one, it ended up injuring the teacher. And then as a result, your child was sent home. Not necessarily discipline related, but was just sent home without any kind of write up. And are you asking whether or not they can do that? Yes and no. All right. It depends on what the purpose behind it is. Because sometimes, if everybody is getting to the bottom of what is the behavior, what's causing that, so that it isn't repeated, I don't necessarily have a problem with a targeted, calm-headed approach on how to move forward so that it doesn't escalate into more behaviors that could end up causing regression, and could end up escalating unnecessarily situations. So it sort of depends on what the purpose was, but it doesn't sound like you were involved in that process and that decision making. So doesn't sound like that's what they were intending. It sounds like to me that they were having a powwow on what to do, because an educator was injured, and what do we do about it, and how do we move forward? And it sounded more of a CYA kind of meeting than anything else. Where what I didn't read, and let me double check, but I didn't read whether your child had a behavior plan. Um, and it sounds like to me that when you were letterboarding with your child, it also tells me that he has a different way of communicating. He doesn't communicate traditionally. And if that's the situation, then of course he's going to have behavior, because in his situation, behavior is going to be a form of communication. Now, why would you not have those problems? Well, you know how to communicate with your son, and he feels that he is heard and understood. Now, if that isn't the case at school, there's going to be behaviors because they don't know how to communicate with him and they don't understand him, and it upsets him, understandably. So that's number one. We got to fix the communication issue. Number two, where's the behavior plan? Because that's going to overarch over into the communication area. We need to identify properly the functions of the behavior. And if he's trying to communicate and you guys aren't listening, you're trying to shove something in his face he didn't want, or he didn't want to do anymore. And, the teacher ended up getting, now I don't think it was intentional. So, what are we going to do? So what is the school doing with regards to resources to ensure that your son is understood, he's communicating properly, that he has a behavior plan, so that we can expand that understanding? And what kind of support can we give to the aide so that the aide can be successful in, just like you are at home in that communication? All right. So that has to be handled. But were they right in sending him home? Like I said, it just sort of depends. And I do that all the time, depending on how serious this is, because the last thing I want to do is send a client of mine into the lion's den with a bunch of hungry lions that do not understand that that's not meat. It's so, until I can sit there and get the training and get the resources in there, sometimes it just is not a positive thing to continue to keep my client in that environment. And that's where, if there's means, I'll sit there and ask the parent, are we okay with temporary homebound? Just homebound services temporarily until we can sit there and figure out how to fix this problem inside the school. And that's where I would sit there and say, look, we need a competent, reliable board certified behavior analyst. We need a good augmentative communication evaluation, unless you already know what he needs. And then who is the professional that can come in to sit there and teach how your son's preferred method of communication or means of communication. But at the end of the day, should they have sent him home with no write-up. No, that's a violation of state law, especially if you live in a state that has compulsory education laws. Your child has to be educated for X number of days per year. So there needs to be some kind of notation, because I have frequently run into situations to where schools will early release, and then it either shows up as the child was there when they weren't, which is wrong. The school shouldn't be doing that. Or they'll end up showing it up as unexcused against the parent and start triggering truancy, when in reality, and of course they all go, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, that was just a clerical error. Really? Because the courts don't care if it's a clerical error. Many times, it's just a mill. It's just an assembly line of rotten parents truancy. That's what these people, they're trained to think that way. When in reality, so much of this stuff that ends up that direction was accidental, or should never have gotten to that point, but schools don't care. So there needs to be some form of documentation just to protect yourself, and protect yourself in a couple of different ways. Because if everything continues to decline, that's evidence for you. Early releases, that's evidence for you. It's evidence that they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to serve your child. And you've repeatedly told them how to serve your child, who your child is, what your child needs. And if they've been ignoring it and early releasing your child, then that's a big, huge no-no. All right? Now, if they want to sit there and say that he was suspended, they can do that for up to 10 days without a change in placement or triggering a manifestation determination meeting. But at least you have documentation. And quite frankly, that documentation, because of the nature of your son's disability, would actually support you if you needed to go forward with something like due process and advocate for your child in that capacity. Okay?